Welcome back to the Free Mouse MC YouTube channel, and we're today here with the beautiful Royal Enfield Himalayan 450. I finally get the chance to review this motorcycle. I tried so hard over the past year to get my hands on one. I had like dealerships cancel on me last minute and everything, and now fan of the channel Felix provided me with this motorcycle. It's the follow-up to the Himalayan 411, which is already in my eyes a modern classic. Let's see if it lives up to the expectations. On top of that, there are many things new with this motorcycle. For example, it is the first time that Royal Enfield ever used a liquid-cooled engine in its 451cc single cylinder. That engine produces 39.5 horsepower at 8,000 RPM and 40 Newton meters at 5,000 RPM. This is about half what a Tenere would produce, roughly at the same weight. However, even though the Royal Enfield Himalayan is only 7 kilos lighter at 198 kilos, it comes in at half the price of something like the Tenere, starting at 5,700 and going up all the way to the highest spec model for 6,200. And for that money you get quite a lot of bike. The bike has continued from the Royal Enfield Super Meteor Showa upside down suspension, coming in with 200 millimeters of suspension travel in the front and in the rear, a 17-liter tank, and another Royal Enfield first, a DFT dash, throttle by wire, and rider modes. Will this new technology on the bike actually improve the riding experience for this being a first on any Royal Enfield? Let's see what the Royal Enfield Himalayan 450 has to offer. The bike comes in at a very flexible seat height of 820 millimeters to 850 millimeters, depending on what seat you have. There's a low seat, there's a normal seat, and there's a rally seat that we already saw on the EICMA motorcycle convention. This is how that looks from me sitting on the bike. The bike right now is on the center stand, which is also nice for the bike to have and needs to be included when thinking about its 200 kilo weight, also with the different luggage racks. And this is how that looks on my physique at 6'5" or 1.95 m. So let's get this thing on the road. So as you can see, all the mud puddles are still with ice on them. And we're right now here with the Royal Enfield Himalayan in the frozen mud. And I have to say, so far the bike rides really nice. And through the I just had a big piece of ice hit my foot. And yeah, it's quite the nice riding experience. You cannot change the modes while riding. You have to stop to switch off the ABS. You have some wheel spin at the back. It's nice and controllable because the center of mass feels very low, and as a result you don't really feel the 200 kilos. Like, it feels properly like a small adventure bike, and it's very manageable. And the 200 millimeters of suspension travel also do a really fine job. Getting into some deeper mud here now. The 21-inch tire does good work with this. Yeah, like even here getting into some of the ruts here and going a bit slower, I can also really nicely shift while driving while standing. That's always a bit a tough one. Many bikes kind of struggle with that. The Himalayan does that really well. You don't really have the low down torque like on the older Himalayan, but therefore you have a lot more go at the top. Like, it doesn't gas out as quick, but the low down torque is still decent. We need to turn around. Also here you see the turning circle of the bike is relatively decent, which is important when being stuck off-road. And here we get a really nice comparison because Felix is on his BMW GS and he now had to get off and like reposition the bike to turn around on this simple forest road right here while we are just like chilling. So you really see the difference here in like maneuverability, even though that bike is only 50 kilos heavier. I mean, still, this one is still a heavy bike, but it's a lot more maneuverable. So the mud is actually a bit of a real challenge now, but the Himalayan does a really decent job. Like, I'm now literally off-trailing to the side. Felix did some really good pre-production scouting here for the routes. Definitely credit to him. The thing is, like, I'm not the most experienced off-roader. Like, I've never done a course or anything. And I feel confident and decent on this. It's good fun. It's good fun and it's accessible to everyone.
Just
I really have to give the Himalayan 450 credit here because the fun factor of the bike is really, really big. We even still went exploring off the beaten path after the off-road part of this video was finished. And I can really say that the bike is very controllable also for someone who doesn't know what they're doing, and even if you slip up sometimes, the bike is very easy to catch and has a very low center of gravity, and with the low seat height shouldn't scare anyone. So we now just took the Himalayan 450 through the paces off-road, and I have to say it performs really, really well, and you don't feel the 200 kilo weight. And I have to tell you, Royal Enfield is never going to produce a lightweight motorcycle. What do I mean by this? The bike has a steel frame and the bike is made for the Indian market, and they're just using the bike a bit differently there, and it's also for the longevity of the motorcycle, because a steel frame can handle a lot more, and if it cannot handle something, it bends. And you can bend it back into shape. So the bike is really solid and basically will last a very long time, which in the long run, I would always take over having like a lighter bike. And for the weight it has, it performs really well. Sometimes we had really loose mud conditions today, and sometimes the front wheel was doing something different from the rear wheel, and you had always total control, and with the seat height being very low, it's very manageable. The weight is very low in the center, and I love the front fender design with it going like all the way around the wheel, because let's be honest, people kind of nailed front fender design in the 1920s already, and this just keeps the most dirt of you as possible, and it looks great, and it has the nice little gap in between the tire, and with the front forks protection, it's really nice in that regard. But speaking of the design, there are a few things that maybe are not the nicest for the typical Royal Enfield customer. So let's continue and let's get this bike on some solid road.
Give me a black motorcycle, give me playback on a vinyl and some cheap aviators from 65. Give me snakeskin boots, skull swaying like a noose, and I'll be clinging to the back of this Indian vibe.
So we're right now here with the Royal Enfield Himalayan 450 on the open road, and it handles it well. You can feel that the focus here is more on the off-road side. I would say the bike is 60% off-road, 40% on-road, but it also does the on-road duty very well. You feel vibrations from the single cylinder, but it is a single cylinder, like you're not changing that. Here's roughly how the bike pulls. I would say it has similar pull to something like the Interceptor, and the bike shifts really well. Like, that's something Royal Enfield really has down, is how to have a good feeling shifting one cylinder, which is sometimes a bit dicey. We cannot really completely push the bike in the turns because we're close to freezing temperatures. But the bike handles everything well. I can definitely sum up, it's a good bike. But it's a change for Royal Enfield, 100%. If I liked all the bikes I tested from Royal Enfield really much. It doesn't feel like something like the old Himalayan does, or something like the Meteor. It's definitely a good bike. It's a very decent machine, but it's lacking a bit that Royal Enfield factor. That really begs the question: why throttle by wire on this bike, and why different rider modes? Because truth be told, I talked to Felix, and he said he had never used the rider modes on the bike. The bike doesn't have cruise control, which would have been something that the bike actually would have benefited from. I don't see the benefit of putting a throttle by wire on there. Also because one of the great appeals of Royal Enfield bikes is how you can maintain them yourself and how you feel very connected to your machine. And this is still the case with this one, don't get me wrong. It has good, most likely you can do all the work pretty much yourself, but it puts another barrier in there. And the same kind of goes for the DFT Dash, even though that is more of a personal taste thing of myself than me actually being critical of that. It's definitely a different bike compared to what Royal Enfield usually does. That is definitely apparent. I feel like this boils down to no one who's ever ridden a Royal Enfield or sat on a bike with under 50 horsepower was like, you know what make this bike better?
rider modes and a throttle by wire. So I don't really get it, because you could have also made the price point a bit cheaper with like not having that.
So I just came back from spending the time on the Royal Enfield Himalayan 450, and honestly I have to say it's a great bike, it's great fun, it's very beginner approachable. You have a great time riding this thing off-road and you're not really worrying about it a whole bunch. However, I do have to say, earlier when I talked about the throttle by wire and the DFT dash, this one costs you the typical visceral Royal Enfield feeling. That is not really here. If you come from like a Meteor, or you're looking for the Meteor or Classic experience that the 411 Himalayan was able to give you, that's lacking here a bit. This also is reflected in the design. While the Himalayan 411 was a really gorgeous looking retro bike while being an adventure bike, this has a round front headlight, yes, but that's kind of where it stops. This is the first Royal Enfield with plastic, modern looking blinkers. Like, there's not been a Royal Enfield that had that before. All of them were thought through completely to the end with beautiful blinkers. Plastic, yes, but all beautiful blinkers. However, I'm not saying it's a bad bike, because it's a really, really great bike. It's amazing to ride, and it also improves on many things that the 411 came short of. While the bike was visual, a great sensation, it allowed for this really great, laid-back, almost meditation-like form of traveling. The bike was kind of lacking a bit of like power at the end of the day. It was a bit of a slouch, to be honest. And with this bike having more power, it allows you to engage in more action while being on the road and go quicker through the turns, ride a bit more aggressive off-road, and it handles off-road really amazing. The turning circle is amazing. You don't really struggle with this bike. Even though it's heavy, it's so compact that everyone can kind of throw it around, everyone can turn it, and it's very forgiving. So all in all, I have to say the Royal Enfield Himalayan is really great. Many YouTube videos in the past have said on this motorcycle that the engine is very vibration intense and that you really feel it. I cannot agree with that. It feels like an argument made to kind of make a negative argument. Because yes, it vibrates, but it's never uncomfortable. And it's a bit of a shame, because at the same time there are things that you can actually criticize about the bike. For example, the off-switchable ABS is on every time you restart the bike. And really often when you're off-road, you wait for someone, you help someone, you turn off your bike. And if it's then on every time again, that's not that nice. No one ever uses the modes. I don't believe that anyone has a desire for that, and wind protection is not existent on the bike. Which also doesn't really justify the weird shape of the tank, because when I first saw videos of the bike when the bike wasn't out, everyone was like, yeah, it gives you so much great wind protection on your legs. That's true. It doesn't bring anything if the wind hits your chest center, you know? But all in all, this is a really great bike that is really nice also with its off-road focus, and if you actually want to ride your adventure bike, this is the bike for you. It will definitely last you. You can fix it mostly yourself except the throttle by wire. It's a great bike, and I'm curious where Royal Enfield is going to develop into with the direction they're taking with this motorcycle and what we will see in the future from them. And if you like this video, definitely like and subscribe and check out the links in the description, and see you in the next one.